What's up, everybody? Steve Taylor here with another installment of Rocket MSP. I am joined by Patrick Gallagher from GridPane. Welcome, Patrick.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate you reaching out and making this all happen.
Absolutely. So I have so many questions. Okay,
Yeah.
so I want to give everyone a little bit of backstory here. I have been a Cloudways customer for a couple years now, and I, up until recently, have been a very happy Cloudways customer. But they were purchased by DigitalOcean, and they've just kept making little changes. And like one of these changes would not have been enough to frustrate me, but it's like all of these little changes keep adding up. And then on top of that, you have been awesome enough to offer this really sweet deal on GridPane. So I'm getting 40% off for the whole year of GridPane for unlimited servers and sites. And then I can go to the cloud service and pay their price instead of the basically double is what Cloudways charges.
More
Whatever.
than
So
double. Yeah, more than double in a lot of cases.
yeah, so it just made sense. So I signed up for GridPane. I still have everything on Cloudways. I haven't moved anything over to GridPane yet. I've set up a couple servers,
Okay.
but for the most part, I don't know that I would say I'm gun shy because I mean I literally signed up yesterday. Just a couple minutes before we shut down for the day, right? So where I'm at right now is how do I go?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I wanted to have done and out before today, but one of the things that we are going to do is for anybody that gets on any of these plans, like so long as you have a paid plan at GridPane, tomorrow we're going to release this migration training, which I think will be super useful for a lot of people that have a lot of sites at Cloudways in particular, or really anywhere. What we're going to do is basically work through two different things. One is my thought processes and my actual workflow for what I would call a complex migration. Okay. And so let's say you have a WooCommerce site that gets a lot of traffic, has a lot of orders, has a lot of concurrency. Like you really want to think through exactly how you move a site like that. But then the other thing that we want to show people is, let's say you have 100 sites on one server on Cloudways. We can show you literally how to run one command on that server, and it will just move all of your sites 100% over to GridPane. So literally, you have to have a site. You have to have a server running inside of GridPane that's at least the same size as the server that you're moving from, and then literally you run one command, and it will grab all of the data, all of the files. It'll even grab your SSL certificates, and it will send all of those to your new GridPane powered server.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, so that's something that we're going to drop tomorrow. And depending upon your availability, I might have you hop in and throw more questions at it or whatever. But yeah, I mean, literally, you can just look at what you have at Cloudways right now, and certainly at the very least, everything's going to run the same, and generally, it's going to run better because I believe one of my team members was referring to their caching, like the exact stack that Cloudways uses. It's Apache, and then there's Nginx, and then there's Varnish, and it's like they just referred to the entire thing as convoluted, and I genuinely agree with that. Like it's they're running things that just should not be there, and it's just not as memory efficient as if you just run Nginx and Redis, for example, which is what we recommend. So if anything, some people will actually be able to have smaller servers and still run all the sites that they already had on there. But if you're someone who had, if, for example, you had a lot of problems with Varnish, for example, just eating all your RAM, well, that doesn't exist in our world. And so that problem is long gone. But yeah, I mean, you generally can just look at, okay, I've got this box set that I'm paying, let's see, like arbitrarily, yeah, I think the $10 box at DigitalOcean is $16 at Cloudways. The $12 box is $30. Yeah, $24 box is $60. So it's like it's almost difficult to figure out what to get, because you're going to be saving a significant amount of money just by going direct to the provider.
Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen.
Sure.
I figure worst case, I just blow everything away and
Yeah. Well, because now they can see your IP addresses, so that's generally why you want to
yeah.
keep those safe. But I mean, literally, the way that we recommend doing stuff like this is once you have your server set up, then you put them behind Cloudflare, and those public IPv4s never become public. It doesn't really matter. It's not like having that information makes it possible for people to hack you. It's just they can send DDoS attempts direct to your box. That's the biggest thing that Cloudflare protects against.
So you mentioned Cloudways. So I read one of your articles that like blew my mind, because it's not like it's something I've never heard of before. I just never thought of doing this, and it's just so simple and so awesome all at the same time. CNAME flattening and setting up. So I got a domain, yourhost.dev. I just bought a generic domain. That way it doesn't have any brand or anything behind it.
Yep.
And I'll be able to basically set up, here's an A record for the fully managed. Here's an A record for the antique server. You'll see here that fully managed antiques. There we go. And in theory, for all of my clients that have gotten my Cloudflare, all I do is set up a CNAME for the root and for the www, point them both to this. Yep. And even if I decide to upgrade the server, because with Vultr and all the cheap ones, if I upgrade the server, it's going to basically make a new server, right?
Yeah, so the way that I recommend doing that in our platform, we don't allow you to, so most of the cloud providers do not allow you to size down. They generally only allow you to size up, and that's because of like drive partitioning problems that'll probably themselves. So what we recommend with all of the providers, and this takes your thinking even a step further. So certainly you want to have CNAME flattening, and you want to control these things at the DNS layer with something like Cloudflare. I highly recommend that you control your client's DNS on their behalf, charge them a premium to do so. But at the very least, if you're using things like CNAMEs, then you can constantly be changing backend IPv4s, and it doesn't really matter, But I recommend taking even another step further. And so what you do is build your boxes, like whatever. Let's say the average user needs a half dozen servers. Okay, they've got clients in 3 different regions in the United States and 3 different regions globally, around the world. Get those things set up, and then go directly into Vultr and get a floating IP address. Okay, this is something that you can do at pretty much every provider, but you can certainly do it at Vultr. Okay, so if you want to Google search for Vultr floating IP. What this allows you to do is now you have an IP address that is locked to a data center, okay, inside of Vultr. And so what this makes it really useful for is any server that you have inside your account, inside of GridPane. If, let's say, you have Black Friday, Cyber Monday coming, okay, what you can do is spin up another server in that exact same data center that's larger, okay, then use the clone tools inside of GridPane to clone all of your sites from server A to server B, and then behind the scenes just assign that floating IP from server A to server B. You make no changes at Cloudflare whatsoever, and then when you're done post-sale, you can clone everything back to that old server if you just kept it along, or like once you're on server B, you can kill server A, then you can spin up server C, which is smaller, and then you can clone everything from B to C, move the floating IP address again, and then you've literally scaled to handle a massive traffic event, and then scaled down, and you literally just paid for what it is that you needed in the moment. Yeah, does that make sense?
Now you called it a floating IP, so is it literally just?
Yeah, it's called reserved.
Oh, okay.
Different places call it different things. They call it reserved IP. I think DigitalOcean calls it floating. I think at Google, it's like ephemeral, and then you can make it permanent. The thing to keep in mind with all of these, regardless of what they call it, it doesn't cost you anything so long as it is attached to an instance. Okay. If it's not attached to an instance, then they charge you something like $1 per month for the IP address. Okay, which I think is
Well,
well worth it if you're gonna, just to
this
have
one it
that.
seems like they're charging $3 a month regardless to have a reserved IP.
Oh, did they change it? I can barely see that.
Oh, sorry.
It's,
Yeah, so Vulture is implying that the reserved IP is $3 a month, or essentially 0.4 of a cent an hour.
yeah, let me see. That certainly could have changed. The last I knew, it was most places aren't charging for them if they're attached. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to text the CEO of Vulture and tell him that I'm pissed off because I didn't know that they were doing this. I think it's worth spending the money regardless.
I mean, for $3, who cares?
Yeah, because it gives
Especially if you've only got a couple
literally gives
servers.
you that ability to scale up and scale down, and you have zero DNS downtime. And you can literally just bounce between different box sizes.
So yeah, this right here. Oh darn it! I just resized it and then I moved the window.
It was the right size, and then it went down.
Let's try this again. All right. So, yeah, this is
that convert existing. That's what you want.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get it's really weird. I think at VO you can't convert an existing. You have to get a new one, and it's like, why? It's already assigned to the box. Like, it will be assigned to the box for as long as the box is alive. It's wild.
So there we go. Now I've converted my existing over to reserved, and check this out. So if you look at my Cloudways, my servers, I've got three servers here, and I've got 2 4 gigs and a 1 gig. And with Vulture, I've got 1 8 gig and a 2 gig. So I decided, I'm still going to save money based on what Cloudways charges. I decided to go ahead and get beefier servers than what I currently have, because my hope is that I'll be able to put more and more websites on these servers. So when it comes to servers, when we're setting these up, I'm going to go back to GridPane here. I'm going to click on Vulture. So, guys, you're probably wondering, well, how did you get all this to work? There's onboarding videos. I don't want to reinvent the wheel when there's already some really good onboarding videos that Patrick made. But what I do want to talk about is maybe some like best practice stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's just assume everybody's going to go with Vulture because, I don't know, reasons.
Yeah. Right. Well, if you want, I'll touch on for a quick second. I do think it's worth talking about why it is that we recommend Vulture and why they're in the driver's seat there ahead of everybody else. So Vulture is actually the very first platform that I ever built into what ultimately became GridPane, because for a long time, DigitalOcean charged twice as much as they do now. And so, but the other big reasons, that's not a reason. That's not a reason. We did it with them first. It doesn't really matter. The reasons that I think people should take a really strong look at Vulture is their high frequency offering is still pound for pound the best performance for your dollar that you can get kind of in the cloud infrastructure as a service game. That's what all these companies here at the top, and that's what AWS, Amazon Web Services, and Google Compute Platform, they're all infrastructure as a service company. Okay, so that's if you hear that term thrown around, that's the story. But so Vulture has been doing high frequency longer than pretty much anybody in the game. The other thing that I think that they're doing that is really, really useful and important to me in terms of the wider WordPress ecosystem is they're rolling out a new data center basically every single month. I think they just launched their 33rd in Tel Aviv. But crucially, they're putting new data centers into Latin America and Asia Pacific, which is where I see WordPress growing. Okay, that's where there's tons of people obviously in the United States and Europe and Australia where WordPress is totally a thing, but where the massive growth is happening, in my view, is developing economies in Latin America and Asia Pacific. And so that's where they're putting servers, and they're putting fast servers there. And so if you're serving customers in those regions, it's a really good idea to take a look at what Vultr has, because the likelihood that they're going to have something closer than DigitalOcean and a lot of these other players is significant, especially if you're serving those developing regions. And also they've got tons of data centers in all the usual suspect places as well. So US, EU, they're there. So let's actually let's run through a build, and you can just ask me
Sure.
what you might have.
So we'll make a server here. We'll call it Steve's Awesome Server, and I'm gonna put this in Chicago just because I don't know, it's the closest to Cleveland I can think of.
Yep.
And server plan, I'm just gonna do a cheapo 2 gig because it's a one that we're gonna blow away.
Yeah, sure.
OS version, look at all those options. I'll pick the only one.
We actually are pushing 2204, so very soon you'll see 2204 there. And I would recommend that people just go straight to 2204 for testing anyway.
Okay.
We've been testing it internally for a number of months, but literally the OLS packages for that just dropped like a couple months ago, and so it's still sort of, we're still asking people to test it, but
Gotcha.
It's not going to appreciably move the needle there.
So with the web server options, here's where it gets complicated.
Sure.
Everyone I see talking about and fawning over open light speed, but you yourself have even said, just go with Nginx. It's tried and true. It's been around longer.
So I'm biased in this context. Very, very biased in this context, because I have to run a hosting company that powers 100,000 websites. Okay. So when I think about the problems that I need to solve, this debate comes down literally to human resources for me. Okay. So we hired one of the key members of the cyber panel team. It was their Owen was, I think, their head of customer support. And so these are people that are literally working on open light speed. Okay. And so the reality is that there's just not, for every one Owen, there's like 100 of my guy that lives in Dallas, Fort Worth, and is our Nginx expert. Okay. There's just not enough talent out there in the world that can actually run OLS at a very, very high level. And so everybody on my team is thoroughly versed in Nginx, and everybody everywhere. Like if we all get hit by a bus, it's much more likely that you're going to be able to get very, very high quality talent that you can hire on Upwork or really anywhere in the globe that knows Nginx deeply versus knows OLS deeply. Okay. And so if you're trying to solve for complex workloads, which that's really where OLS sort of purports to make all the difference, right? Is that it's like, oh, you can handle 10,000 concurrent checkouts at the exact same time. Well, if that's actually what you need, then I would argue that OLS is absolutely the wrong thing for it, because it's beta. Like it's literally beta all the time. They have no SLA around open light speed. So I just wouldn't use it. Like I would use it for tinkering, and I would use it for, does it matter if the site goes down here or there? Yeah, okay, fine. But if I'm working, like I've got a business to run, like I've got sites that are doing, millions of dollars a month on WooCommerce. Like that stuff belongs on Nginx. In my opinion.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Now, I'm all about, new standards and all that stuff. So does it make sense for us to use the HTTP 3, or just because it says open beta, that shouldn't be in production?
Yeah. I mean, I would not use any of the bottom two. The bottom two options are basically for the speed demons and the nerds that want to test things. The top option there, the default option always is the right one. Okay. Like we have very, very sane defaults for a reason, because we want people to be able to basically just say, client, here's the name of the server. It's named after the client. They're in Chicago, so I'm going to put it in Chicago. $10. Okay. Anything with 2 gigs of RAM or more is good in my book. and then just stick with those defaults. Nginx is perfectly fine. Percona is perfectly fine. The other options are theoretically maybe slightly faster, but we almost never see that like being meaningful enough to move the needle, you know. And I choose reliability 99 times in 100, you know.
Okay. Now for the database, I'm familiar with MariaDB.
Yeah.
I that might be what Cloudways is using.
I think it is actually, yeah. So the two trains of thought there is Percona is used in more enterprise cases, and MariaDB is used in more quote unquote performance cases. Okay, and so MariaDB is an open source fork of the MySQL project, and Percona is an actual drop-in MySQL implementation. Okay, so the reason you're not seeing MySQL there is because that's what Percona is. Percona 8 is MySQL 8, and MariaDB 10.5 is the open source fork of that project. Either one of them is perfectly stable. It's really more preference there than anything else. There are certain things that Percona can do, like clustering, that's a little bit more polished than MariaDB. There's certain things that MariaDB can do that are a little bit ahead of Percona, neither one of which will matter for 99% of use cases. So again, you can just name the server, pick your price, and go. You don't have to play around really with the other options. And again, you're going to be able to have, like, your sites are going to be very, very, very performant. So don't think that you're leaving money on the table by not picking HTTP3 or OLS or MariaDB.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
And once you pick those things, it's really that simple. We just hit create server, and it's going to start building the server, and then it's going to give me this information where,
that,
you know,
safely disregard. Like, that's, you probably won't need to use that, but you can copy it and save it if you want to, because ultimately what you're going to do is, ideally you're going to have an SSH key that is, you know, a secure SSH key that's running on your machine, and that allows you to securely connect to your servers if you want to. Okay, so some people, one thing that gets really intimidating for people, because we make it very obvious that you can do these things, is they go, well, what if I don't know anything about servers? Yeah, and I go, well, then just never log into them ever. Okay? You don't have to. You know, like people think that because our platform makes it so easy for you to get into your servers and do whatever you want with them, they think, oh my God, I have to do that. And it's like, literally, you don't ever have to touch your boxes if you don't want to, you know. I think it's useful to develop the muscle of being able to do very sort of rudimentary things, like literally log into your server, look at logs, look at how things are structured. I think having that base level of comfort and just knowledge about, like, oh, it's a server, and when you tell it to do things, it'll do things, you know. That's really what all of this front end UI is doing behind the scenes. We're actually logging into your servers on your behalf and running these commands, running these functions, setting things up for you, running updates. All of that stuff is actually happening behind the scenes. And if you know where to go and look, which our support will show you, you can learn a wealth of, like, how actually WordPress runs underneath, and how the internet actually sort of works, you know, at the base level.
Now, that's actually one of my questions that I had. What kind of maintenance do I need to do on one of these servers compared to Cloudways? Yeah, sounds like the answer is none.
Nothing. You know, like people. I remember I was talking to a guy, and he was he was at Liquid Web, and he's like, yeah, you know, we don't want to do any of this stuff, because we already, you know, we've got servers that are going, like, the OS version is going end of life, and the MySQL version is going end of life, and so we already have to upgrade MySQL. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, don't ever upgrade anything. Like, we've got all of that, you know, like literally all of the security updates that your system needs to get, we automatically install those things as soon as they are available. And if they are, in some cases, you have to have what are known as restart required updates. Those are things where it's like the kernel that actually runs the server and the operating system of the kernel, or the operating system of the server. Those like operating system level components, those things need to be restarted and reloaded into memory. And so I think our default is we have that happen at like Sunday at 2 a.m. But you can actually adjust that. You can make it so that you have to go in and do them. But I strongly recommend that you don't do that. Just have it automatically happen at a time where you can literally just tell your customers themselves, if we have, emergency required maintenance, we run it at Thursday at 1 a.m., or whatever it is, and then if they see a blip in their uptime monitor, they'll know, oh yeah, Steve had to update the box and it went down for 15 seconds, so.
All right.
Yeah. So
now
don't do anything like this process that's running down here in the bottom, this takes maybe 10 minutes. And then once that's done, that server, don't tell anybody, but like literally you could just cancel your GridPane account if you wanted to. That server will run for years. Yeah. So we'd rather that you not do that. Like we would rather that you keep an active account at GridPane.
Sure.
But one of the key things is that we want you to own this aspect of your business. We don't see ourselves as an alternative to Cloudways or an alternative to Kinsta or an alternative to anything. Like in many ways, like when you're out shopping for grills, like this time of year, like Home Depot, they switch from snow blowers to grills, You walk in and they're right there. It's like the lawnmowers are out front and you walk in and the grills are right there, And it's like, yeah, you can look around and pick and choose between different grills. That's sort of like picking between different hosting options. What I see us as is like you're buying a McDonald's franchise, like you're getting the book that shows you how to run the restaurant, Whereas if you're picking from different hosting providers, you're just saying, yeah, this one chars me, this one chars me, this one chars me. We're kind of in the business of, we want to teach you how to be able to hire like stoned high school kids to run this thing for you and just make money off of all of it. Like we're trying to install that kind of thinking inside your business. Is we want you to own these relationships direct with the infrastructure provider so that you know exactly what it is that you're going to pay and you can control exactly what your margins are going to be.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, there's 3 buttons here. Update server, which honestly all this lets you do is like rename it and I think something else.
Yeah.
Power the server on and off or reboot it and then delete it. So the Steve's Awesome server we just made, if I hit this button right here,
I think what it's going to do is it will, because the server is building right now, I don't know if it will let you actually kill it, but whatever.
Let's
if you go to delete it, then it will stop the, it should, well, yeah. So now what that should have done is made an API call to Vultr to say, hey, kill this thing. Yep. So it's gone.
It's gone.
Yep.
All right.
And so again, we from day one, we've never had a situation where we own the boxes and we turn around and we resell them to the users the way the model that Cloudways had. Okay.
Yeah, this is a much better setup already.
Right.
So
well, I mean, there's better unit economics clearly on price, but it's also like another thing that I think is really valuable is one big problem that people have with almost every hosting company they've ever dealt with before they get to us is there's a problem and support says the solution is upgrade. Like just get a bigger box, get a bigger account, go up to the next plan, okay? We don't have any incentive to tell you that you need more infrastructure because we don't make any money on that. Like literally, like if we tell you need a bigger box, it's because you need a bigger box, And so we can show you that also. So it's like we can show you in the logs, like, oh, here's this plugin of yours that you either need to disable or you need to optimize the code around that plugin because it's chewing up your entire box, So your options are either fix your code base or go up to a bigger box because you're exhausting your resources, And
that would be using this screen that we would just check the service manager, and you'd be able to say, hey, obviously you've got problems on your machine because look at all these
Yeah.
things are at,
Well, you'll start getting
80%
error
CPU or
notices.
whatever.
Yeah, like we have this tune to basically, like, once you get to 85% disk utilization, for example, it's going to notify you and say, hey, Steve, that's probably too much. And then at 90, it's going to say the same thing. At 95, it's going to say the same thing. And then at 99, it's still going to let you keep filling your server up, but
Well, that's not good.
but it's going to tell you, like, hey, like the thing that we do provide that's not baked in as part of default support is, if you want, you don't even have to look at those things. Like, you can use our 360 service, and we'll monitor your servers for you, and we'll get the notification at 3 in the morning that your client installed the wrong plugin, and now they're making backups of backups of backups, and they're filling your drive up. We'll actually remediate that for you if you want. But literally, yeah, just watch your notifications, and we'll tell you all the things that you need to look out for. We'll say, hey, your MySQL is, like an example ticket that we get regularly is MySQL is using more than 50% memory usage. It shouldn't, so we've restarted it. And then people will go, well, what does that mean? And it's like, well, we just told you. Like, MySQL shouldn't be using more than half of the RAM that your server has, so we restarted it, and it probably is going to fill up again. So either optimize your code base or get a bigger server, and then MySQL won't be able to use half of your RAM.
Now, when we're adding new sites, bundles sound really nice because it's a way for you to set up themes and plugins that automatically get installed and even activated. However, it seems like it would make more sense for us to create a site that we use as a blueprint and then just clone that site, because there's a bunch of like WordPress settings and plugin settings and all that we can start to customize on that blueprint site. So
Correct.
Why would we want bundles instead of cloning?
So very, very good question. So you were exactly spot on. If I was in most use cases, what I would say is you build like your, let's say you build half of your site in bricks and you build half of your sites in Elementor, okay? Arbitrarily. I would have a bricks, what I refer to as boilerplate, and then I would have an Elementor boilerplate, okay? And then what I would do is I would get all of these settings exactly the way that I want them. And then you may even have like custom firewall rules, for example, because you might have some specific thing. Like I just installed a widget on a site, on a WordPress site a couple days ago. It's like a viral loop sign up tool. And it was sending back a fairly loaded header, and our web application firewall blocked it, okay? And so I just added an exception for that site. And now if I need to use that ever again, like, I could just clone that existing site, and it's got all of my settings exactly the way that I want it. So you get your PHP settings, you get your cache settings, all of your data is configured. If you had some kind of third-party plugin, all of that stuff is just on, and you've got all the data, okay? So that's how I would build. The only reason that you would not want to necessarily build that way is if you didn't want some of those confidential, like API keys to your SendGrid account. If you didn't want that to be in a site, that's more of a scenario where you would use bundles, okay? Because now the bundle has all the themes, all the plugins, all of your work, you're ready to get working, but it doesn't necessarily have your confidential credentials embedded, okay? So this could be, oh, I've got a new client, they haven't paid yet, but I want to hit the ground running. I can show them something, in a staging environment effectively, but I might not give them all the goods. You know what I mean? That's what you could use bundles for.
And it could also be like, for example, on Cloudways, when I set up a brand new Cloudways site, they've installed Breeze, bot protection, and then that's it. So I might want to create a bundle for when I'm going to set up a brand new site, and maybe import that site from somewhere else. Like, I'm bringing a client in, because even though you're importing the site, I think those plugins that you've installed will still be there.
Correct. Yeah. Generally, when you bring something over, especially from another host, if generally it's not going to overwrite existing plugins. Okay. Sometimes they do. Some plugins can be destructive like that. But
especially if they've got older versions.
Yeah. So you could do bundles certainly to solve for some of that, because even though you're migrating them in, that you're probably going to install those plugins anyway in the long run. So you could spin up a new site, and then when you're ready, it's just there. You can do many combinations of all of these things. Like there's no cost for you to have as many bundles as you want, and then the only cost to have a site that is cloned is the site is hosted somewhere. So there's effectively zero cost there as well. So I mean, it really just comes down to naming things so that you don't lose track. Like you could have 10 different bundles. You could have 10 different boilerplate sites. You could have a boilerplate site that is everything except rank math. I don't know why you would want that, but you could.
I'm an SEO press guy, but I get it.
Right. Insert your desired thing. So
right.
And again, like once you have, you can also do all of these things via Git if you wanted to. I mean, you can slice and dice 50 different ways.
Yeah. Git's one of those things I have not yet played with. It's on the long-term to-do list, not the anytime soon to-do list.
Sure. It's where I think people should go, and I think one of the key things that's in our higher plan, our Dev Plus plan, is when you really start getting serious about this stuff, you can do like immutable code base that's version controlled with Git. So what that is you could picture that you had a network of, say, hundreds of sites that are all managed by one code base. And when you push a change to that code base, it's updating sites and servers all around the globe,
All right. Now that I will want to ask you about at some point, because if for example, I knew that like, let's say I want to deploy a new SEO, like let's say I decide I'm going to switch from SEO Press to Rank Math, and I've got the Rank Math zip file and I've got the serial number and all that. What it sounds like you're saying is I could then use Git to deploy that change to all of my client sites at once.
Correct. You'd want to think through it. The immutable, what I'm describing there is basically immutable multi-tenancy, which again is not part of panel. Just want to be very clear. This is an upgrade path for people who start to get really serious about product. Like really, it's you start productizing what it is that you do. Okay, and so if I had to do it all over again, instead of selling, like at the end of my agency, I pretty much wasn't touching anything lower than $25,000. Okay. If I had to do it all over again, I would still do that, but I would have a $250 a month version of that thing, so that when someone comes to me and says, hey, I want a real estate website that does blah, blah, and blah, I go, well, okay, if you want it fully customized, it's $25,000. And they go, whoa. And I go, or you can have kind of the cookie cutter version, which is do it yourself, doesn't have nearly as much hand holding, and that starts at $250. And then they go, yay, because I've anchored them to $250. And I know I have once I build a $25,000 website, it's the property of the client, but it's also mine. It's also intellectual property that I created. And unless I sold it as an exclusive non-revocable license to the client, which of course I didn't, then I can take that same IP and I can just stamp it out again and again and again, And it's like the things that go into a $25,000 website for someone that does luxury real estate in Chicago versus somebody that does luxury real estate in Orlando, it's almost identical. Like they might have a slight MLS difference with their local association of realtors, but if I just flip that switch and solve that, then it's like, well, here you go. Here's a $25,000 website over there. There's one over there. There's one over there.
So let's talk about building sites.
Yeah.
So, picking the server makes perfect sense. System user, I'm going to assume I want to let it auto create the user for me.
Yep.
And then WP users, this option seems fine.
Yep.
admin name, email, password, bundles. I set up some defaults. So obviously those defaults are already set here. So I changed it from 8.0 to 8.1 for PHP.
Perfectly
No
fine.
problems there.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, well, so here's what I'll say. It depends, okay? So I'm not concerned about the stability of PHP 8.1 and WordPress core on PHP 8.1.
Some of the
But
plugins.
it's plugins, yeah. So the short answer is that if you want to guaranteed win, I'd probably still be building on PHP 8, but we've seen a lot of success on PHP 8.1.
Okay.
But it just
My plugin stack does all work on 8.1.
perfect. I mean, and that's really all you have to confirm. You could build it as 8.0 and then check everything, and then you can switch it to 8.1. And if it's working, then it's like, okay, now I know I can build them on 8.1. But just test,
PHP process management. I did read about this. I'm going to leave that on dynamic. Server caching is where I got a little mixed up. So you seemed to really like Redis.
Yep.
And then fast CGI page. Remember, this is an OLS server, I think.
That is an OLS server that you spun up?
I thought.
It shouldn't. You shouldn't be able to choose that then.
Then it must be Nginx then.
Yeah. So here's what I would actually recommend. I recommend what you have there, which I think is our default. Again, like we always try to have the default selected option be the right one. Okay. So PHP process management, dynamic. Just leave it. People see like, oh, how do I manage my PHP workers? Don't. Just let us do it. Like the default is really, really sane. I think Redis page and Redis object caching is the way to go. And if you choose that, then it's going to install everything that we need on the plugin layer to just manage all this stuff for you. So you don't have to do, like we don't have a plugin like Breeze. We just have the Redis object cache manager plugin that's just talking to Redis on the back end, So that's all that's all built by Tilcruise. If you want to do OCP and Relay, we can get those things for you, but those are paid upgrades. But most people will not notice. Like most people, the people who need OCP and Relay know it, and the people who don't know if they need it don't need it. So that's sort of the short answer for that.
So SendGrid token. I don't need one of those SMTP plugins.
So right now we natively integrate with SendGrid, and pretty soon we're going to natively integrate with, I think, just about everybody. But behind the scenes, that is actually using a transactional email plugin. Okay, it's just automatically installing it for you.
Got it.
And for anybody that's like, well, I use Postmark or I use Sendinblue or I use whatever, just undoubtedly there is a plugin that connects to that one. And then what I would do to solve for that is just, again, build your boilerplate where you have your Postmark configured inside your plugin. And then when you clone that site, every single site will have transactional email solved. One key thing that you can do at GridPane that you can't do at Cloudways is because you can access the server directly and you can access the server as root, if you want to configure your box to use just regular postfix and send out emails, you can do that, okay? We just don't recommend that you do that. We highly recommend that you use an actual transactional email service to guarantee high deliverability.
Got it. Yep. SSL, primary domain, that should be all we need because primary domain might be stevetaylor.com. And okay, so, if we were to do,
I think auto SSL is our default. I always recommend that. What that's going to do is it's just going to try. I forget what the retry interval is. I want to say it's maybe like twice a day or I think basically what it's going to do is when you add a domain like whatever the hell .stevetaylor.com, okay, it's going to, when you add it, it's going to try to add an SSL and it's going to see if the DNS resolves. And if the DNS resolves, then it's going to try to add an SSL. If the DNS does not resolve, it's not going to try and add an SSL. Okay. And then I think again, like every 12 hours or so, it's going to just check and see, is the DNS resolved for this site? If it is, then try and get the SSL. You know, and so
Gotcha.
it'll just constantly try to get them because we want the default state of all sites to be SSL, obviously.
Cloudflare DNS. So by doing this, it's going to look and see if the domain already exists in my Cloudflare as a zone.
Correct.
It's not going to create the zone for me if it does not.
Yes, this is really well outlined in our documentation, but I believe the way that we do Cloudflare full is we look to see again if the domain is inside your Cloudflare account. And then what full is that it actually gives Cloudflare the DNS records that are requested by Let's Encrypt. And so it uses like Cloudflare to do DNS powered validation so that you can actually get an SSL from Let's Encrypt before you've even moved the DNS over. Okay?
Perfect.
But obviously, if you do move the DNS over, then that's the default way that Let's Encrypt does SSL, is that it just tries to call itself back, you know, at the resolved DNS. So
now, local backups, these are going to store locally on our server. Correct. And use our server storage space. Correct. Remote backups, this can use something like B2 by Backblaze.
Yep. And I highly recommend either Backblaze. There's certain use cases where I recommend Backblaze. There's probably even more use cases where I recommend Wasabi. So there's a downside with Wasabi, but it doesn't bother me in the least. The downside with Wasabi is that it everything that you send to Wasabi, whether you like it or not, you're going to get charged for 3 months of having it there. Okay, so that's one thing to watch out for. With me, that's within my desired retention window anyway. Like I want to have 90 days worth of stuff, no matter what, because it's pennies. You know, it's literally like pennies. You know, but there's something really cool that you can do at Wasabi that currently you can't do anywhere else, and that is immutable backups. And that's really, really cool, because what that means is so long as the backup was good when it was made, i.e. your site was not hacked or didn't have malware or didn't have like Bitcoin mining happening in it, they could literally have a root level hack of your box and try to delete all of your backups, and they can't touch them, they can't change them. And so this basically eliminates a lot of existential threats that an agency might encounter. You know, like what's the worst thing that an agency could have? Like, oh no, my sites go down and you delete my backups. You know, like when you turn on immutable backups at Wasabi, like they can't delete them on their end. It's like you could picture like two people on opposite ends of the nuclear silo, and they've got to like turn a key, you know, in order to be able to delete your backup. You know, like you have to like send them your ID and like all kinds of stuff to get them to, like, you have to show them that there's good cause for you to delete the data, like some kind of legal requirement, you know, in order for them to actually delete it. So that's pretty cool in my book, because basically what that means is if my sites are secure today, then my backups are good today, and they'll be good for as long as I don't let my sites get hacked, which we do a really good job of making sure that your sites don't get hacked.
I like it.
Yeah.
Now, if I click on one of my servers here, I'm going to update my time zone.
Yep.
And you mentioned how it was really easy to get connected to the server. I assume that's as simple as grabbing the IP and connecting.
Yeah. So what you'll want to do is close out of this actually, and then go up to your settings, settings drop down from your name there. Yep, your settings. And then once that loads up, so what you actually want to do is keys. Yeah, exactly. So we've got docs on how to generate this if you've not done this before. Okay. If you want, actually, I can share my screen.
Actually know how to generate this, so yep. I'm going to try generating this. I'm gonna have you make sure I'm not screwing something up here. Sure, so I use a tool called Termius. Okay. I love Termius.
Okay. Yep. It's a good one. You picked pretty much the one. So
let me make that smaller too. All right. So if I'm in Termius here, and I hit the settings and go to keychain, I can make a key. We're going to call it
visible to them, but I dropped it in the chat.
What was that?
It's in the chat. We can add it in, but we've got lots of docs on like 18 different ways to do this, depending upon what your operating system is. You know, like I'm on a Mac. If they're on Windows, Terminus is a good way to do it.
All right, I just popped that into the comments for them. So I'm on PC. Womp womp.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah,
so I would have to drag and drop a private key to import, and this doesn't have a key. So I'd actually have to use something like PuttyGen to generate a key, I think.
Correct. Yep. So you're gonna on Linux and Mac, the command is just actually ssh-keygen is the word, and then you just tell it, you know, what strength you want it basically. So I usually go with 4096 keys, but there's also that you can do it again. You can do it 8 different ways. You know.
So what people don't see is I opened up the Putty key generator, and I am creating my keys. All right. And now in here, when I hit the add key,
It looks like we're looking at your database screen now, or we're looking at a. Oh no, that's the command line. Yeah.
Oh, it's a different window. That's why.
Hi, Quinn.
I can't wait until I get a new computer. They ordered me a new one because this one I complained about. It just doesn't hold a candle to my Mac Studio.
Yeah, I mean, once you go Mac, you pretty much go back. If it's useful, I can share my screen and just give people an idea of what this looks like.
I have it here. It's just going slowly.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, so here's one called GridPane Private. I'm going to drop this in, and there we go. And then I've got the public key here.
Yeah, that's actually the public key is what you want to add into GridPane, not the private key. The private key is what you keep on your end.
Yeah.
Yep.
I always add the both. There we go. Into this platform. That way I've got it.
Right. So in Terminus, yeah, you can attach the private, and it uses your public key can be shared everywhere. That's the whole value of symmetric key encryption, is that you can, you know, especially if you have a secure symmetrical key encryption schema, you know. So.
Oh, good. Invalid public key passed. Interesting. Is it because I did an RSA key and not something else?
No. Let me see. I can actually emulate to your account. See what you're doing. There are a lot of Steves, apparently.
That's funny.
What? if you drop your key in the private chat here, I can
That
probably.
worked. I got it. So I just had to copy it the way that Putty Keygen showed it in the visible thing and not the way that it was saved to a file,
Got it.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so you were able to SSH then? SSH in?
Yeah. Well, I haven't actually tested the SSH, but yes, I will be able to SSH.
Yeah. So again, when people see us messing around in the command line and get kind of freaked out, literally, you don't have to be afraid. Number one, you don't ever have to do this. You don't ever have to SSH into your box. Okay. But I do strongly recommend that if you've got an hour to kill on the weekend, or whenever, skip one session of Netflix and chill and actually just treat yourself to learning, what's kind of happening behind the scenes there, because you can learn a lot very, very quickly. And you can actually see how all of these pieces go together. You can sort of see how the sausage is made. And so in a lot of ways, our knowledge base, I think, is one of our most valuable assets, and anybody can access it. Like people on Cloudways can access it. People that run cloud can access it. In a lot of ways, it's a PhD in DevOps and in what we refer to as SRE, which is service reliability engineering. And so what that is basically when you get to a very large corporation like a Google, the highest paid engineers are the SREs. Okay. And these are the people that they have an uptime guarantee that they're responsible to the C-suite. Okay. So Google itself has a guaranteed uptime window of, it's probably 6 nines. Okay. And so what these people are doing is when people are making algorithmic changes, you'd think that the machine learning nerds are the highest paid. Like, no. The machine learning nerds, they're very highly paid. Don't worry about them. But they actually then push code to like the QA team. And then the QA team approves it through to the SREs, and the SREs test it. And if code gets pushed up to them, which does not hit spec, it gets sent back without any answers at all. They just go, nope, this is not happening. And so when people struggle with WordPress websites and they can't get them to perform well, they can't debug things. It's like our senior members of our team, we can handle any website that you could throw at us. You could have a WordPress website that has 10,000 concurrent checkouts per second, and we could build you the system that could support that. Because we've just seen so much of it. And so I'm not recommending that every developer needs to learn how to be able to do that, but you can certainly narrow the gap between where you are now and what that looks like. And you can do that totally for free with our education, with just engaging with our community and engaging with our documentation.
I like it. All right, so you'll probably see I am messing around here with keys and all that. And what I did not do is look to see in GridPane. I did not add the key, so I'm doing that now. And there's a little, now that I created an SSH key, I'm not sharing that screen, and I just don't feel like it right now. Once we add the SSH key to GridPane, another little button popped up. Remember earlier we had the update, reboot, and delete buttons? Now there's a fourth button with a key. And so I clicked on each of those servers and added the SSH key that I created. So that way my SSH key can access those. And if I hit enter, in theory, I'm going to connect to this server.
Yep. So what I would recommend people do is once they generate their key and they add it into their settings, right below where you just were, you can say default keys. Okay. And so if you have 2 or 3 primary machines, like I do, then it's like I have 3 keys that get added to every server that I build. So that way, if I go down into my office, it's there. If I'm on my laptop, it's there. If I'm on my wife's desktop that used to be mine, I'm able to access my server resources. Okay. And so what I think is useful is when things go sideways, I immediately, like everybody on our team and people who get to know these things well, you just reach for the command line because it's the single point of truth. It's like you can see everything very, very quickly, and you can surface problems just much, much faster that way, in my opinion. And generally what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up looking at a log, which I want to show everybody in the sites view how to get to that, because that's really useful. Is just being able to look at logs, because that is how you surface all the problems of WordPress. That's how you figure out which plugin is crashing your site. That's how you figure out which error in which theme is eating all your memory. It's just literally looking at logs. And so that's the kind of stuff that our support constantly points people to, is, yeah, go look right there. That's where it is.
Now, for me, I'm trying to connect, and it's just, I think, telling me to F off. It's not connecting. Now, what also confuses me is I thought that a key was in lieu of a username and password, but it's asked me for one anyway.
Yeah, so then this sounds like something has not been done correctly. Okay. So if you want, can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Present. So when these things are working correctly, like this is me just SSHing into a server that's connected to my account. Okay. So the syntax here is literally just SSH as root to this server. Okay. And then now I'm on this server, and I can see all of I can just go to www, and I can see all the sites that are on this server. They're in this, they're just here. So this is a backup server of our primary marketing site. Okay. And if I actually go into this folder, like I'm literally looking at now, contents of the site, and I can directly interface with WordPress from here if I wanted to. But you can also now run hundreds of commands that do all kinds of things. Like most people don't realize that they can run things like I think it's, let me double check the syntax so I'm not getting this wrong. GridPane. WPCLI. Yeah, so I believe we have this installed by default.
And just so you know, we're still looking at your SSH.
Yeah, no worries. So this this tool is one of the tools that you can run at the command line level, where you can do things like you could actually check. You could do WPCLI check all. And what this is going to do is it's going to run a health check of, wait a minute, I think it's -- all. This is running a complete health check of WordPress in PHP itself. Okay. And so this is saying, oh, we've got an error. WordPress doesn't verify against its checksums. Like this is because we manually adjust things. Success, all PHPs passed, this base eval. There's success, there's warnings. These are things that you can actually run, and then you can actually run profile as well. And so profile is pretty cool because it actually looks at all of the code that runs inside your WordPress site, and it chunks it out, and it'll tell you how long the execution time is of your actual code. So it'll say, hey, when you're instantiating that plugin, that's creating 900 milliseconds of delay, and then you can go, oh, I should probably look at that plugin. But these are the kinds of things that we want to empower users to be able to do, and it's like,
that sounds awesome.
At the end of the day, it's like a lot of the things that you just can't even do at all at Cloudways, or certainly at managed environments like Kinsta, because you literally can't access the file system, you can do all of those things. So like people are like, hey, how do I do ion cube loader? We've got all the documentation. Like run whatever you want. You know, if you actually want that stuff, you can have, the world's your oyster. You know, but if you don't need to install those things, then you don't ever need to install those things. You know?
And I think the thing that's going to be the biggest struggle for people switching from Cloudways over to GridPane is not knowing where to begin when it comes to, now that I've got all this access, what should I do first?
Sure. Well, that's why I think what we want to do is just make more sort of workshops and more trainings available to really everybody at every price tier, because you know there's the Spider-Man analogy of like, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, you have great power, but if you don't want to take responsibility, you don't really have to. You know, like, I mean, we want people to know how to think about sizing servers. We want people to know how to do basic debug. We want people to be just better WordPress developers. But at the end of the day, you kind of don't have to if you don't want to. You know, like, you can take as much or as little of this on. And I think the biggest one is just knowing how to handle migrations, knowing how to think about how to size workloads. I think that's a really big one. And we have tons of great documentation around that. I think if it's useful, maybe I can spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about that right now. Is that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So the general rule of thumb is that I never want to build a server that has less than 2 gigs of RAM. Okay. So fast and dirty, that's $10. Okay. Directly at Vulture. And generally what I want you to do is I want you to pick high frequency. And so the cheapest one at Vulture is $12. Okay, or the one that I would recommend that checks both boxes, that has 2 gigs of RAM, and it's a Vulture high frequency box. So that's $12. Okay. The reason that I want you to use high frequency servers is because if you're looking at a Vulture high frequency server, for example, that server, the maximum frequency of that server is 5.1 gigahertz. Okay. So that's fast. Okay. That's like gaming server fast. If you were running a basic workload at DigitalOcean, on average, that's going to be 2 gigahertz. Okay. So you've got the exact same CPU allocation available to you, but for every 2 units of work that one is doing, the Vulture box is doing 5.1 units of work in the exact same amount of time. Okay. And so this is especially valuable and especially important when you're working in the back end. Okay. So this is especially important to us as developers, as WordPress agency owners, because when we're working in the back end, we're making hard PHP hits. We're like actually hitting the server. Okay. When our visitors are coming, they're hitting the caching, they're hitting the CDN. You know, they're not actually hitting the box. So it all feels really, really fast to them. But if they're doing dynamic interactions, so like you're editing the site, or you're doing a dynamic checkout, like you're buying something or you're signing up for a learning management system, that's where you want that high frequency stuff. Okay. Because it just processes those transactions so much faster. Okay. And then literally the only other consideration that you need to take into account is, where is the visitor? Okay. Or where is the person that's going to be maintaining the site? So in your case, you picked the exact right location because, yeah, Chicago is as close as you're going to get to Cleveland. You know, I think actually if you spun something up I think AWS has an Ohio data center, but don't go with AWS because you're going to spend way more on disk and you're going to spend way more on bandwidth. And so that's why we don't recommend AWS, normal AWS.
Right.
Even though you integrate to them, and you can bring, with the custom server option, you can bring any server you want. You can use OVH, you can use Hetzner, you can use Reliable Site, you can use you could have your own server if you want to. Like, we have one of our users that he has a server that's connected in his office in California that he's managing with GridPane. I don't recommend going that route.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you can go that route. So again, sort of nothing smaller than 2 gigabytes, and then If you're building static sites, which most people are, sort of static brochure mom and pop sites, I recommend that you not put more than 10 sites on a box per gigabyte of RAM. Okay, now you definitely can go beyond that if you want to, but that's just my sort of personal recommendation: is don't go more than 10 per gigabyte of RAM. And then if you're doing a dynamic site of any kind, WooCommerce, LMS, BuddyBoss, I would say put it on its own server, and I would give it at least 2 gigabytes of RAM just for that. Okay. So don't mix, you kind of don't want to mix your dynamic workloads with non-dynamic workloads. Okay.
Gotcha.
And so that's more my bias and my personal workflow. There are tons of people on GridPane that have dozens of WooCommerce sites all running on the exact same server. You can do that if you want. We just don't recommend it. Okay.
Okay.
Like, just give those sites their own headroom, because if you're doing things correctly, you should be charging at least $100 a month to host those kinds of sites. So give $100 a month client their own $12 box, and then just make 88% gross margins on the hosting, and thank me later.
Now, one of the things that I saw was safe updates for Canary sites. I don't know how much of that is just marketing slash it, that's what it's called.
Yeah, so that's just naming conventions, okay? So we call it a canary site because you can picture throwing a canary down the coal mine, okay? Take the canary into the coal mine with you to see whether or not it dies. If the canary dies, then the coal miners are soon to die afterwards. So what Update Safely does, and I love that they called it, I think they call it safe updates at Cloudways, right? Yeah, so what they're doing, to the best of my knowledge, is they're using Blog Vault off-site, okay, to actually update your stuff and then check to see whether or not it worked, okay? And that's why it's slow, okay? Whereas Update Safely, on our end, we actually make a full copy of the site on the server, and then we do visual regression testing between the before and after, and then we see whether or not the update worked, okay? So the Canary is the clone of your live site that gets all of the updates pushed to it, and then we take a before and after picture, and if it doesn't work, we go, yeah, it's that page, and then you can drag a slider back and forth, and you can go, oh, it's the contact form. The contact form broke, so now I need to go and kick that person in the tush, and have them, come into, compliance with 6.1 or whatever it is,
And what does that cost?
So right now, I think that those are only available on Dev Plus. I'd have to double check, but we are going to make that as an available upgrade. It's just, I don't have an exact ETA on that.
Gotcha.
Probably within the next, probably this quarter, theoretically.
Okay.
We should know what that's going to be. Because the biggest reason that we haven't pushed that out wide is because we required people to have a bigger server in order to do it, because the visual regression testing is actually very heavy on a server. Like, you're basically making a copy of the live site, cloning that site onto the same server. So you've already added, some operational overhead to the server, and then you're visually comparing the live site and another site that's both running on the box. And so we required people to have like 4 gig servers or something like that. And we got very, very little testing in the early days, because people are like, well, why would I do this? And it's like, well, I don't know. What's your time worth? Like, how many updates are you pushing on the regular? Like, your time's not worth like $5 a week, So yeah, so what we're thinking about doing is making it sort of a dedicated bolt-on service where we'll do all the heavy lifting offline on our end, so that there's no potential impact on local running workloads, because that's kind of our biggest concern, is that it's like people already overload their boxes and they don't look at their notifications, and they tax their boxes, and it's like, if you added something like that on top of it, it could be destabilizing, So we're thinking, how do we make it so that people just can't light themselves on fire? Because people really like lighting themselves on fire.
It sounds like a good time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess, like,
now,
summer, let's heat it up for the summer.
Vulture's got four different kinds of servers: general, high frequency,
Yep.
high performance,
Yep.
and all optimized.
Yeah.
What's the
So
difference?
CPU optimized and memory optimized. You want the high frequency. That's the one you want. Okay.
Okay.
So out of all of those, that's the one that you want. And if anyone is having difficulty getting them, especially in regions outside of the United States, and you need a lot of it, let me know. And I literally have their C-suite on speed dial. Like we text and message on the regular. So they're a really cool team there, and they see WordPress also growing outside of the United States, outside of the usual suspect spots, and so they want to use our community and our connections to the wider WordPress community to make investments around what it is that we all need. So if you've got somebody that that needs a lot in Bangalore, or needs a lot in Brazil, reach out to us and we'll put stuff on a plane and ship it over there.
Very cool, man. Well, hey, this went longer than we anticipated.
Totally.
I have so many more questions that I could be asking you right now. The one that's there's two more. I'm going to rapid fire them.
Yeah.
Support. One of the big things that people seem to have a problem with on the panel plan is support. Not that your customers have a problem. The people that are like, I'm hesitant to switch to GridPane because of lack of support.
Yep. So two things right now. Well, number one, our platform is always 24/7, 365 supported. And so what I mean by that is that things are not going to go down in the middle of the night. Like we're already monitoring for all of that. Okay. And you'll see stuff where the most common thing that happens is we're posting notifications to say, guess what? Let's Encrypt is down. Like that literally happens way more frequently than we actually have bugs. And they're like the internet, like they're a big part of the internet being able to run. And so we constantly see things where a data center will go down, an infrastructure provider will have API issues, a third party will have issues, and we have to tell people, hey, we're sorry, you can't get an SSL right now because literally Let's Encrypt is down. And that's not us. Yeah. So stepping beyond that, what everybody on panel has is they have community first support. And so what that means is that if you have a problem, you post it into the community. Okay. And if this is an actual like, oh boy, something is wrong, there's a real bug, we're going to know about it probably in single digit minutes. Okay. That would be my guess, because what'll happen is if you have an actual bug, you'll post, hey, I've got an issue. And somebody else will say, yep, I also have that issue. And then the instant that we see that, we go, okay, we're on it, And then that issue will get assigned an actual support ticket. And then we may reach out to you and say, hey, can we jump on Zoom and actually talk through this, because maybe we can't replicate it on our end. Okay. What's much more likely to happen, though, is you're going to post an issue and say, hey, I've got this problem. And someone, maybe from my team or someone from the community, is going to say, yeah, that's this. And then they're going to show you the documentation. And you're going to go, oh, yeah, I've got a firewall. Like I'm running the 7G firewall and it's conflicting with this widget, Okay, now I know I should turn off the 7G firewall, and then it'll start working, and now I know I need to go read more about the 7G firewall. Okay. So that's how support works. It's not that you don't have it. It's that we want people to be posting in the community first, because we have lots of people in there that are very, very helpful, and they've already seen your thing 500 times, whether it's my team or whether it's just power users in the community. The other thing that happens that's super useful is that you start to learn who the power users are in the community, and you can actually reach out to those people and potentially hire them if you want more help, if you need more hand-holding than we're able to give you, because we can't, like there's all kinds of situations where somebody's like, oh, I just need, I need somebody to spend an hour or two working with me to configure the firewall, for example, because I have a specific use case. Our team doesn't have the bandwidth to do that. We're working on you know, we're working with people that need to solve like $10,000 an hour problems, you know, like that's what we're working on. But that's the benefit of community is that if there is a real problem, it's going to immediately get escalated up to us anyway. And we average single-digit minute response times on support tickets. But if it's something where it's just like, yeah, you missed that part of the manual, then that also is going to be obvious very, very quickly, you know. And then the next thing that I think that we bolt on to that is, number one, we're going to start doing more and more office hours where it's like, okay, I have 10 more questions, you know, come to the office hours and we'll answer them in the order that they're received. And then the other thing that we're doing, because we've got a lot of testing that shows us that this is true, is we're going to probably have AI-powered chat available to all paid plans. Because the thing that we've seen more and more and more is literally if you put in any question and then you actually attach ChatGPT to our documentation, it just gives you the exact right answer, you know. So that's what we're seeing. Oh, I think I lost you. Or maybe it's just me. I don't even know who. You can go and see the live stream.
Edge just crashed on me.
Ah, there you are.
That was fun.
So yeah. So hopefully that answers everybody's questions in terms of how support works.
It does. And then the only other thing I was going to say is, you said that tomorrow you're releasing this big thing for migrating servers from Cloudways over to GridPane. Any chance I'm able to get that command now?
I will get it. I will not share it on the live stream, but I will get it to the back channel. Yeah,
I appreciate that.
There's a proviso that comes with it.
Understood. Cool.
Yep. Okay,
and
cool.
then what I'll do is I'll record myself doing that.
Yeah.
And then you know, give it to you to review, and then we'll post it up for the world to see whenever you're ready for me to post that.
Okay. Cool. Sounds good, Steve. All right.
Awesome.
I'm gonna jump. I'll probably message you asynchronously, and maybe we'll catch up again tomorrow, depending upon availability, and maybe you'll be part of the madness tomorrow of the migration stuff.
Absolutely. I look forward to it, man.
All right,
Take care,
cheers,
Patrick.
Steve. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.